Before the arrival of Christianity, before Islam crossed the deserts, before Africa was renamed, rebranded, and reinterpreted, Africans already had answers to the biggest questions humanity has ever asked. Where did we come from? What controls the universe? And who or what is God? But here's the question nobody ever asks. If African gods existed, who created them? Were they imaginary? Were they inventions of primitive minds? Or were they something far more dangerous to Western power, something too intelligent, too deep, too liberating to survive conquest? Because in African cosmology, the gods were never the beginning. They were not the highest authority. They were not all-powerful, and they were never meant to replace human thinking. This video uncovers a truth buried under centuries of mistranslation, demonization, and silence. A truth so powerful that once you understand it, you'll realize African spirituality was never about worship. It was about alignment. Stay with me. Because by the end of this journey, you'll see African gods in a way you were never taught to. If you ask most people today about African religion, they'll say one word: polytheism. The idea that Africans worshipped many gods, each competing for power, attention, and control. But that idea is completely wrong. Across Africa, from west to east, north to south, every major cosmological system begins with one truth. There is a supreme source, a force so vast, so complete, that it cannot be limited to form, image, or personality. Among the Yoruba, this source is known as Olodumare, the owner of all existence. Among the Igbo, Chukwu, or Chineke, the great spirit that creates and sustains reality. Among the Akan, Nyame, the infinite sky consciousness. In ancient Kemet Nun, the boundless primordial waters from which all things emerged, this supreme source was not human-like. It did not argue, fight, or demand constant praise. And most importantly, it was never worshipped directly. Why? Because Africans understood something deeply philosophical. You do not worship the ocean. You understand its currents. The supreme source was seen as too vast, too absolute, too all-encompassing to be reduced to rituals or shrines. So instead of praying to the source, Africans worked with its expressions, and that is where the gods come in. The gods were not rivals to the supreme being. They were channels, extensions, cosmic principles given form so humans could understand and interact with reality. Thunder, fertility, justice, chaos, wisdom, time. Each god represented a law of existence, not a supernatural celebrity. This is why no African god was ever described as all-knowing or all-powerful. Only the source was infinite. The gods were specialized forces, tools of balance in the universe. And once you understand this, everything changes. Because it means African spirituality was never about blind belief, it was about cosmic literacy. Gods as cosmic functions, not superheroes. One of the biggest mistakes made when interpreting African gods is treating them like characters in a fantasy movie. Powerful, emotional, jealous, fighting for dominance. That framework is foreign. In African cosmology, gods were never meant to entertain, they were meant to explain reality. Each deity represented a cosmic function, not a personality, but a principle. Thunder was not random, it had intelligence. Fertility was not luck, it followed law. Chaos was not evil, it was necessary. So Africans gave names to these forces, not to worship them blindly, but to relate to them. This is why gods governed. Justice, balance, cycles, transformation, life and death. And here's the part most people miss. No god operated alone. Every force existed in relationship with others, just like nature itself. Rain without soil is useless. Order without chaos becomes stagnant. Life without death becomes imbalance. This interconnected system taught Africans how to live, when to plant, when to fight, when to wait, when to change. The gods were instruction manuals for existence. That's why priests were also philosophers. Why rituals doubled as education. Why myths carried layered meanings. African cosmology wasn't superstition, it was applied metaphysics. Were the gods created by humans? So now we reach the most controversial question of all. Did humans create the gods? Western scholars laughed and said yes. Missionaries insisted Africans invented gods out of fear. Modern critics say they were psychological crutches. But African cosmology gives a far more sophisticated answer. Humans did not create the gods. Humans recognized, named, and activated them. Think of fire. Fire existed long before humans. But once humans understood it, controlled it, and gave it meaning, fire became usable power. The gods worked the same way. Africans believed the universe was alive, filled with intelligence, vibration, and energy. Rituals were not magic tricks. They were alignment technologies. Through language, symbols, rhythm, dance, sacrifice, communities tuned themselves to cosmic forces. Shrines were not idol houses, they were energy points, memory anchors, and teaching centers. When a community consistently aligned with a force over generations, that force took form in the collective consciousness, not invented, focused. This is why gods differed from region to region, not because truth changed, but because environment and experience shaped expression. A river-centered people emphasized water forces. A warrior society emphasized strength and protection. An agrarian culture elevated fertility and cycles. Same universe, différence. And that idea that humans are co-creators with the cosmos was one of the most dangerous beliefs Western systems encountered, because people who see themselves as co-creators are impossible to enslave mentally. Ancestors, spirits, and the birth of deities. In African cosmology, death was never the end. It was a shift in state. To live was to be visible. To die was to become expanded. This is where ancestors enter the story, and where many people get confused. Ancestors were not gods, but some gods began as ancestors. Across Africa, individuals who lived extraordinary lives, warriors, healers, lawgivers, culture founders, did not simply disappear when they died. Their memory remained active. Their influence continued. Their presence was felt in dreams, rituals, and crises. Over time, communities recognized that certain ancestral spirits operated beyond family lines. They protected entire regions, governed moral order, intervened during war, drought, or injustice. When that happened, something important occurred. An ancestor became a guardian force, not worshipped as the supreme source, but honored as a mediator between worlds. This process explains why many African deities have human stories, moral flaws, local origins. It also explains why gods were deeply connected to land, lineage, and community memory. A god was not universal by default. It became powerful because people remembered, honored, and aligned with it, generation after generation. In African thought, memory itself is power. To forget a force is to weaken it. To honor it is to keep it alive. One truth, many names, the unified African worldview. At first glance, African cosmology looks fragmented. Different names, different rituals, different symbols, but when you step back, patterns emerge. Across the continent, African systems agree on core principles. There is one ultimate source. Reality operates through balance. Everything exists in relationship. Nothing is purely good or purely evil. From the Yoruba to the Igbo, from the Akan to the Dogon, from ancient Kemet to Bantu societies, the structure remains the same. What changes is expression. Just as water becomes steam, ice, or rain, without ceasing to be water, cosmic truth took different cultural forms. This is why African cosmology had no single holy book. Knowledge was oral, initiatory, contextual. You learn truth based on your role in the community. A farmer did not need the same knowledge as a priest. A warrior did not study the same mysteries as a healer. This prevented spiritual arrogance. Wisdom was earned, not declared. And this decentralized system made African spirituality incredibly resilient, but also vulnerable to outsiders who did not understand it. How Western rules rewrote the African gods. When Europeans arrived in Africa, they did not just bring guns and chains. They brought interpretation, and interpretation can be more destructive than violence. Missionaries encountered African cosmology and immediately misunderstood it, or worse, understood it too well. They saw a system where no priest was above questioning, no god was absolute. Humans were partners with the universe. That was dangerous, because Western control depends on spiritual hierarchy. So African gods were renamed, translated poorly, stripped of context. Forces of balance became demons. Agents of chaos became evil. Ancestral guardians became idols. Words were weaponized. African languages, rich with layered meaning, were flattened into foreign categories that never fit. And once the gods were demonized, the people were next. Africans were told their ancestors were lost. Their wisdom was pagan. Their past was darkness. This wasn't conversion, it was spiritual warfare. And the scars of that rewriting still shape how many Africans see themselves today. The forbidden truth, what the African gods really represent. So now we arrive at the truth that was never meant to survive conquest. African gods were never meant to replace the supreme source. They were interfaces, ways for humans to understand nature, psychology, society, consciousness. Each god represented a law of existence, not something to beg, but something to understand and align with. This is why rituals were practical, why myths taught ethics, why spirituality and daily life were inseparable. African cosmology did not promise salvation. It demanded responsibility. You were not waiting for rescue. You were expected to live in balance. This worldview created people who feared imbalance more than punishment, respected nature as intelligent, understood that power without wisdom leads to collapse. That is why this knowledge had to be buried, because the people who understand cosmic law do not submit easily. Conclusion. So, who really created the African gods? So let's answer the question honestly. Who created the African gods? Not missionaries, not colonizers, not fear. The African gods emerged from a supreme source, cosmic forces, ancestors, collective memory, human alignment with nature. They were revealed, not invented. They existed as reality long before they had names. Africans did not worship blindly, they studied existence. And what was lost was not religion, it was cosmic literacy. If this knowledge was erased once, it can be remembered again. And that is what African Cosmology Delight is here to do. If this video expanded your mind, questioned what you were taught, or reconnected you to something ancient, subscribe, because this is only the beginning.